The post-apocalyptic genre has produced some of the darkest pieces of modern media, some of the most ingenious books prophesying the future, and some of the most influential movies put to screen. But what the hell is it? Is it even a genre? No, I'm serious. What are the parameters to being considered post-apocalyptic? That your movie, book, show, or game take place after an apocalypse? What about S.T.A.L.K.E.R? It's not really an apocalypse. I mean, sure, there's mutant abominations every which corner of the zone, and sure, sometimes you and a couple of Slav bros have to take cover from the mission in a deserted Soviet bunker, 5 feet apart, because you're not gay. But these eldritch horrors only exist in the zone. So not really post-apocalyptic, more like post-disaster, right? Well, I would argue that S.T.A.L.K.E.R games clearly use themes, tropes, and iconography that shape the identity of post-apocalyptic media. If the biggest surface level difference between S.T.A.L.K.E.R and Fallout is that one of them only shows a life-altering disaster that affects a small portion of the planet, then I'd say that's a pretty minute difference. If there's even one country in Fallout, or a state, hell, even a city, that was unaffected by the bombs, then is it really a post-apocalypse? How big does an apocalypse have to be for it to count? Zombie movies clearly count, right? Many people call it a subgenre. What about 28 Days Later, where the viral apocalyptic outbreak is locally constrained to Britain? It's one of the most iconic zombie movies ever. Genre defining. You're going to tell me it doesn't count because of a technicality that isn't even clearly defined. The post-apocalyptic genre isn't a theme. The theme is a vehicle for what the genre is actually interested in examining. It is more than a simple definition of media that takes place after an apocalypse, whatever you even define as an apocalypse. At its heart, the post-apocalyptic genre is about humanity's reaction to the complete upheaval of society. It is interested in seeing the current slate of order wiped clean, so that, in its reset, we see the true colors of humanity and how we react. The very best and the very worst. And while the genre definitely touches on more, I believe this is its true foundation. And this inherent identity means that the genre deals with some pretty dark subject matter. It has to, otherwise it would be depicting nothing more than a utopia where everything is just dandy and peachy. Without properly establishing the darkness in its world, a piece of media in this genre would have a hard time showing the light that can be found in these dark states of humanity. And if you can't properly show the light or dark of humanity in this genre, then what's the point? What are you doing? You can't possibly be attempting to turn a genre which depicts murder, rape, and sins of humanity into a marketable plushie, right?
We look at Fallout 1, obviously, as, okay, this is the bar for the tone of the world, what you do and don't do.
Games like S.T.A.L.K.E.R, this War of Mine, despite not meeting the pedantic definition of post-apocalyptic, is way more post-apocalyptic than other titles who wear the genre like a badge of honor. Why is that? Something has infected the modern post-apocalyptic game. Not a plague, not zombies, it's not radioactive decay. No, something much more sinister. A virus of mediocrity. A fear of being dark. And I can't think of a more fitting example to start off this conversation than the poster boy for modern post-apocalyptic media. The marketable plushie of the genre. Fallout. Well, more specifically, Fallout 4. This game holds a very special place in my heart, specifically made for contempt, because it was my first witness of a commercially successful desecration of a genre I love. And oh boy, did it spell doom for where the series was going next.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly now!
Say what you will about Fallout 3, it's definitely stupid at times, but it still feels somewhat like Fallout. Sure, it feels like Bethesda's wearing the skinned flesh of Fallout as a thinly veiled mask, but at least it's trying. It's attempting to be dark and horrifying. Fallout 4, on the other hand, listen, we can be here all day if I go over every bad decision Fallout 4 made to erode the horror roots of the franchise it claims to belong to. So instead, I want to look at one key example. The key to understanding how Fallout 4 is watered down compared to the other games is a bit unorthodox. What is something that Fallout 4 lacks that all the other Fallout games before it have? And don't say something cute like, competent writers. We get it. Bethesda sucks. Water is wet. Bob is decomposing in my basement. These are all things we can simply take for granted. No, I need you to think real hard about this. Dig deep. Look past the surface. What would a mature and socially well-adjusted gamer like myself notice is missing in Fallout 4? Hookers. There's no hookers in my post-apocalyptic game. I made fun of this in my last video on Fallout, but seriously, why are there no hookers or even any signs of hired hands in Fallout 4? Now I know this seems like an oddly gooner thing to be focusing on here, but trust, I can care less whether I'm able to pay fake virtual money to have my fake virtual dong stroked by literal decomposing corpse cowgirl gum jobs over there. There's simply a lot of dark aspects missing from Fallout 4 that its vehement defenders can usually weasel their way out of by citing some niche and barely relevant piece of lore that explains why there's no longer any child skeletons in the game. Sure, you can explain away the lack of small human skeletons because of natural decomposition, and how after X amount of years the bones would disintegrate or whatever. Or the Institute came and took them all for DNA sampling to make Robo-Sean. Because whenever you can't explain anything in the world building, just say it's the Institute. But all of that is stupid. They're not in the game for the simple fact that it's not consumer friendly in this modern era of gaming. It's not marketable, it's dark, and not in a palatable, watered down type way. The lack of hookers, in my opinion, is the smoking gun. It doesn't matter how many special points you've allocated to your autism stat. Every possible explanation you can think of for why there are no hookers in the Commonwealth is contrived, nonsensical, irrelevant, or simply cringe. The commodification of desperation is an ugly but deeply authentic reflection of human nature. Fallout 4's silence on the topic is deafening. Well, you know, now that I think about it, I guess Bethesda did add hookers into Fallout 4, in the shape of your companions, because they all have a ridiculously obnoxious libido, exclusively for you, the very recently widowed.
1 week later.
I love you, Curie.
And I love you. I'd still like to have that talk.
So, you've found a minute for me yet?
Do you have time
you ready to talk now?
Tell me
I promise it won't take long.
You're in love with me.
Sonic, you gotta help me, man!
I can't get them to stop. They're like rabid dogs. They don't even charge. Have some self-respect, guys, come on. Fallout 4 sacrifices dark, authentic themes for marketability, comfort, and a consumer-friendly experience. To brush these dark topics of an apocalypse under the rug is downright lobotomite-pilled if you're trying to be taken seriously, which Fallout 4 is clearly trying to do in its own pathetic way. But making money and watering down the horrors of the post-apocalypse are not mutually exclusive. I mean, Fallout 3 had hookers and child skeletons and it sold millions. Won Game of the Year, unlike its heir. So then, what's the deal? Any exec-brained commenters care to explain? The Last of Us is far darker than Fallout 4 and still outsold it. Not necessarily for being dark, but it still succeeded in spite of being dark. You don't have to sell your creative soul to make money, Todd. You just have to allow NPCs to sell their soul in your game for money. Then you'll be cool again in my book. And you know, because I'm aware that critical comprehension is an increasingly rare commodity nowadays, I want to clarify my stance on hookers. Your post-apocalyptic game doesn't need hookers to be dark. That was just bait for the Fallout 4 stans, which, sadly, I'm sure they've prematurely bidden. No, there's plenty of great post-apocalyptic media that doesn't depict hookers, but they also don't go out of their way to wipe them from existence either. Instead, they show another side of the depravity of man. The first piece of fictional media in the post-apocalyptic genre is Mary Shelley's 1826 novel, The Last Man. Now, normally I would recommend you read or watch the stuff I talk about in these videos, but unless you enjoy watching paint dry, then I'd advise you steer clear of this one. But I bring it up because it didn't establish the genre of post-apocalyptic media by sweeping the depravity of man under the rug. The post-apocalypse wasn't a playground in this work. Most stories before this book ended with the apocalypse. Usually something of biblical proportion, wiping out all of humanity for its evils. Mary Shelley realized that the true darkness of humanity wouldn't rear its ugly head before the apocalypse. It comes after. A plague rapidly spreads throughout the world. The world's most powerful nations, secure in their perceived superiority, fail to anticipate their own doom. After the virus ravages America, ships arrive in Ireland carrying survivors. These American survivors become the first raiders in post-apocalyptic media, plundering Ireland and Scotland before being stopped by military intervention. The pandemic coincides with the rise of religious cults, one led by a false messiah who convinces his followers they will be spared the wrath of the plague, killing any dissenters who try to reveal his lies. After he can deny his lies no longer, he takes his own life, leaving his followers confused and filled with dread as death approaches. The story ends with what seems like the last man on Earth, wandering the wastes in search of survivors. At least, that's what he claims. But I don't think he's really being honest. He's not searching for survivors, but rather a reason to continue living. Someone or something to give him purpose in a world that has already accepted its fate. And by the way, the last man in this novel also befriends a sheepdog in this part of the book, who kind of just follows him in this futile wasteland wandering adventure. So yeah, people think Mad Max is the origins of dog meat, but he actually has an older ancestor. But as you can tell, this book was monumental for the post-apocalyptic genre, and in the genre's conception, the focus was clear. The focus should be on man. When all of man's creation has fallen to rubble, all of man's constraint released, we are no longer distracted from what's within us. Who do we become when all that remains is the last of us? There's a lot to say about The Last of Us. Quite honestly, I would rather not touch most of it with a 10-foot pole. But throughout all the bickering and screeching its fan base and creators commit through the pile of ceaseless vomit, I'm reminded of why I fell in love with 2013's The Last of Us. It's not the acting, it's not the graphics, it's not Joel, it's not Ellie, it's not even the dynamic between those two. No. All of that was good, but not particularly impactful for me. That is until I reached the last chapter. This is one of the best endings in a game, period, but especially a post-apocalyptic game. I love how throughout most of the game it does its best to paint the Fireflies in a positive light, often even sympathetic. Firstly, by establishing the government's martial law as totalitarian and oppressive. In contrast, the Fireflies take the appearance of a wounded resistance fighting an uphill battle against a tyrannical government. Its leader shot and limping, alone, no army, not even an escort, except some low-life smugglers. Every time we reach a Firefly rendezvous, they've either abandoned it or are dead, even down to their main base. Ellie is always talking fondly of them, with glimmer and hope in her eyes to finally meet them.
Fireflies?
Get down!
I mean, can you blame her? She was raised by the leader of the movement. The Fireflies clearly care for their children if their leader was willing to adopt Ellie, and the game clearly establishes that you should root for the characters that take care of their young in this world, because it's a dying practice. Even their slogan echoes this sentiment. Of course, Joel's not buying any of that shit, but Joel's also an old cynical bastard who almost abandoned a child who needed his help. Oh wait, no, he actually did abandon a child and their family before this whole fallen world thing. So yeah, nobody's listening to depressed Grandpa Joe on Manners of Hope. This characterization of the Fireflies sets the stage for your eventual meeting, where they are not so weak anymore, and they certainly aren't kind. Man's desperate grasp for control. The Fireflies want ownership of Ellie's immunity, so they can conquer and control the cordyceps virus, which, for an organization at war, has many dark implications. Joel wants ownership of Ellie herself as a daughter. He sees the Fireflies preparing to sacrifice Ellie for the chance to make a cure without her consent, and is justifiably opposed to it. Although the main reason for his opposition isn't primarily because of the breach of Ellie's consent, but rather, he doesn't want to lose another daughter. Both parties involved know that, if given the choice, Ellie could choose the option that doesn't benefit them, and they just can't have that. The ending challenges you to draw a line in the sand. What is your stance on bodily autonomy, the right to self-sacrifice, adolescent consent, all wrapped up within the moral question that matters most in this ending? Even if you know an outcome is morally correct, how far are you willing to go to see it through? What Joel did was morally incorrect and reprehensible, but I would have done the same to save the life of someone I love. These are the type of questions that a post-apocalypse forces you to answer, because if you don't, others will answer it for you. And in the case of Last of Us 2, others refers to self-absorbed writers who think they are the arbiter of moral conundrums. All that cool shit from the first game's ending, the moral ambiguity, the reframing of the characters, all of it is thrown out the window like a fresh pie out of the oven as Druckmann proceeds to squat over it and rip a mad turd, then demand you shower him in accolades for how subversive his art is.
How about this one? I call it bold and brash. More like belongs in the trash!
One of my favorite pies, strewn bare on the sidewalk for all to bear witness to Druckmann's vanity. It's quite frankly baffling to me that Neil understood his game would be divisive. He went out of his way, at the expense of the storytelling, to make it obtuse and challenging. Then he cries on Twitter when the ultimate consequence of his divisiveness ends up being a divided fanbase. Neil seems deeply afraid of allowing the player to make their own judgments, which contradict with his intended experience. If you're going to show me a wasteland with a wastelander's code of ethics and justice system, which is predicated on subjective morality and perspective, then attempt to emotionally manipulate me into accepting your perspective on morality as objective fact, then you're playing God with your story. And if you're going to play God and lecture me on what is right and wrong, then you better have a good argument. The first game asks you to wrestle with a moral conundrum, which reveals how far one is willing to go for what they believe is right. The second game attempts to lecture you on what is right, and calls you an incel misogynistic hater on Twitter if you don't agree. I'm wrong because I don't get bitches? Does my intelligence scale with every sexual partner I've had? Why am I wasting my time on an education when I should be selling my ass instead? So, how far is Neil Druckmann willing to go for what he believes is right? Approximately 6 years of downright cruel working conditions for his team, about $220 million, and a 40-plus hour rigmarole whose ultimate message is revenge bad. Ooh, that's some pungent art you got there, brother. I know this video is about post-apocalyptic games being afraid to be dark, and The Last of Us 2 is certainly dark on the surface. So my criticisms here might sound like they're coming from left field, but let me explain. You know those shitty analog horror channels that try to make their work dark by just throwing a bunch of obscene graphic depictions of kids being killed? They'll be all like, Timmy Turner was found dead on the night of 87. He was stabbed in the nuts 9,999 times. After he was stabbed, he was still alive for 70 days, where he had to watch his baby sister being hung from the ceiling fan on the highest speed. It's not dark. It's stupid. But what separates edginess from being genuinely dark? It's not writing skills. It's not the execution of the idea. It's not the presentation. It's not even what's being shown, necessarily. It's a lack of sincerity. It's clear to me that Goober McDarksoul over here doesn't understand the significance of children dying in these horrific ways. It's simply being used as a meta device by the author to get a reaction. In this case, it's shock, disgust. Oh my god, this is spooky. I've been spooked, everyone. But there's no real vulnerability from the artist in depicting this. There's no authenticity. Art should reveal significance. I have a quote from Guillermo del Toro that I think explains this quite well. When I was a kid, it's not a metaphor, but I actually soiled myself when I was a child watching Night Gallery. I remember when the doll smiles, I literally lost control of my sphincter. Oh, shit, sorry. Wrong quote. Here we go. All art is portraiture, and all art is political. These are the things that you cannot avoid. When someone sees you in your entirety for who you are, that's the greatest act of love, because it's granting you existence. And the rarest act of love is, like cinema, to see. While I disagree with the use of the word political here, I think the essence of this idea is sound. As an artist, you are shaping a reality and presenting it to your audience to point out something of significance. Whether it be something you think is cool, something funny, a political reality, or an emotional truth. I'm not interested in recreating reality. I'm interested in recreating an emotional truth. If you call me and tell me, hey dude, I've got something to show you, and you pull out a depiction of Bosch's personal stash of porn, then I'm going to be very unimpressed and call you a cringe, silly Billy. But instead, if you show me something like The Kid in the Camera by my boy, Grumbled Ink Entertainment, then I will shake your hand. A short film like this is dark. A short film like this is edgy. They're not the same, even when they depict similar subject matter. One holds weight, the other is shallow. The dark aspects of The Last of Us 2 lost all significance when the story lost all sincerity. The moment I felt the hands of the writers trying to emotionally manipulate me, the characters no longer felt like real people with motivation. They felt like dolls in a dollhouse Neil is playing with to get a message across. You know, I'm a bit of a hermit. I don't see the sun much. I work the graveyard shift because of course I do. So it takes a lot to convince me to step out of my rat hole. Well, a couple months ago, a good friend of mine convinced me to see the sun once again by inviting me to watch the movie Neil Druckmann ripped off to make The Last of Us. And then I gotta say, my friend was onto something. this isn't going to turn into a video on how Children of Men very obviously influenced The Last of Us. No. The reason I bring it up is to show how Children of Men creates its darkness through sincerity. Children of Men does a lot of things right. It has horror. It depicts the darkness of humanity. It depicts the light, and it even has some pretty killer jokes.
Pull my finger.
Children of Men is set 2 years from now, where 2 decades of human infertility has brought civilization to the brink of extinction, and when all future hope for the prosperity of your fellow man has gone down the toilet. It's safe to say things aren't going too well. But even in the rubble of calamity, a flower can bloom, and so it does. The first pregnancy in nearly 20 years has occurred. Problem is, the mother, Key, is a Fuji, this world's slang for refugee, which in this state of totalitarian society are treated like livestock. After much conspiratorial shenanigans and revolution, Theo, a disillusioned, depressed, and alcoholic bureaucrat, makes it his mission to escort Key and her child outside of the totalitarian Britain and to a mysterious organization known as the Human Project. All along the way, dodging government forces and a radical militant group who seek to control Key and her unborn child for their own political purposes. Which brings us to this moment of the movie. This refugee slum is in the midst of a war between the British government and the aforementioned radical militant group. At least, I think. It's not very clear how many parties are involved in this battle. It's not even clear what started it, which I love. You get hints, but are never given a definitive answer, which works great given the focus of the movie is Theo and Key trying to escape. But anyways, the military force has the militants pinned down in this large apartment complex, along with all the refugees who lived in it. If I can get away with showing this scene uninterrupted without getting nuked, I will do so now. If not, look it up. Is this realistic? No. But remember that Del Toro quote from earlier? This is the most important scene in the entire movie. This is the movie's heart. Showing the humanity of this inhumane world is significant, and the movie wants to depict the significance of that contradiction. More importantly, it respects you, the audience, enough to let the emotional reality speak for itself. Watching Children of Men feels like its creators showing you a painting and asking you, what do you feel? Playing The Last of Us 2 feels like Neil reading a children's book to you, where each page is explicitly made to set up a lesson.
There was once a young girl named Abby, who had a father who was a brilliant scientist and loved rescuing zebras in his spare time. And he was also very clean and very nice looking, and he kept his operating room even cleaner.
But Mr. Druckmann, I remember the doctor at the end of The Last of Us looking more mean.
No, you don't remember that.
But Mr. Druckmann, wasn't the surgery room scary looking before?
No, you're just misremembering.
I don't know, Mr. Druckmann. I remember.
No, you wasn't wearing hiking boots. Shut up, you stupid brat. But then one day, Big Scary Joe came and did a very bad thing. He took a mean scalpel and hurt Abby's father, so he was dead. That made Abby very, very sad. So when Abby grew up, she was still very sad and very, very mad at Joe. So she played a nice game of Wii Sports Golf with him, which made her feel a little better. But now, Ellie was very, very mad she wasn't invited to the golf game. Ellie did many mean things, like hurting Abby's pregnant twin. Oh, also, did I mention that Abby loves her dog? Her dog is so sweet. But then one day, Ellie comes along and stabs her dog and calls it stupid. And that's not very nice.
I'm honestly shocked they didn't make the dog crippled or something. Okay, this scene from the all-time classic movie, Babe 2, Pig in the City, is unironically 10,000 times more emotionally impactful than the entire 40-plus runtime of this, how much did it cost? $220 million children's book.
What is that? Get it out of here. What are we gonna do with that?
Fleelick! Can you hear me?
Yeah, not gonna lie, this kind of traumatized me as a kid. To the point I completely forgot about this scene till I rewatched it as an adult. And I'm not ashamed to say it, I probably cried more as an adult than I did as a kid watching this damn thing. Thanks, George Miller. Appreciate you. The dog lives, by the way. I figured that might be important to bring up before any of you commit Minecraft. The Last of Us 2 is dark, sure, but it ain't no Pig in the City. What good does that darkness do in the game when you don't allow me to wrestle with it? You don't allow me to question it, to interpret it. Children of Men doesn't force feed you its emotional moments. It lets you feel them and do what you will with that experience. Children of Men ends with a question. Look at humanity. Really, look at it. It's evil. It's pain. It's sorrow. It's camaraderie. It's humor. It's compassion. It's good. Is it worth having faith in? Gamers keep asking useless questions. Why did The Last of Us 2 kill Joel? Why does The Last of Us 2 make us play as Abby? Why does Bella Ramsey keep appearing in my bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning? We should really be asking, what's important? What is the point of us? No, seriously, what is the point of us? Humanity. Why are we here? Look, I don't mean to start a philosophical discussion on the meaning of life here. The problem is that games like The Last of Us 2 are so afraid of the player answering this question wrong or coming to a conclusion the writer dislikes that they choke the life out of the ambiguity and use the game as a delivery device for their pre-packaged answer. They fear the player's authentic moral journey. They fear player agency, both in respects to gameplay, but also in respects to the story. But not every creator is afraid to commit. Not every game turns the post-apocalypse into a marketable plushie, or a lecture on 4th grade moral principles. I don't really feel guilt in games most of the time. You play these damn things long enough and that fresh inherent immersion starts to wear off. Maybe as a kid I would have felt bad choosing any evil ending or punting a squirrel into a tree, but now the fictitious illusion games create is pretty much completely dispelled for me. Shoving a shotgun barrel down an NPC's throat in Postal gives me relatively the same guilt as doing the same thing in The Last of Us. The combat isn't really a personal choice of mine. You, as the game designer, gave me a pair of scissors and expected me not to run with them. Like, you set me up here, dude. But what if that didn't happen? What if I really did have a choice? This War of Mine is a Polish game inspired by the siege of Sarajevo. It was the longest siege of a capital city in modern history, lasting nearly 4 years during the Bosnian War. Bosnian Serb forces surrounded the capital of Bosnia, blockading the city and subjecting its civilian population to constant, indiscriminate shelling and sniper attacks. The blockade cut off access to food, water, medicine, and electricity. An estimated 5,434 civilians were killed, including many children. This is who you play as in this War of Mine. The civilians trying to survive a military siege, managing their hunger, thirst, illness, and despair, while scavenging for resources and making difficult choices. And the choices you have to make in this game are certainly difficult. Play this game, please. It's not only very impactful as a piece of art, but it's also just a great game. But if you need more convincing, let me tell you a quick story. I played the version of this game that adds children survivors that knock on your door, and you have the choice of letting them in or rejecting them. Letting them in means one more mouth to feed. A mouth, that is, in nearly all functional respects, a liability. But rejecting them usually means they'll end up dead. But nothing a veteran gamer like myself can't handle, right? So, one day in the zone, I get a knock on my door. A grandpa and his baby grandson, who lost his dad. Although they don't know the child's dad is dead yet. They just know he went to fight in the resistance. So his grandpa is taking care of him, and they come looking to me for shelter. My God, if there's one guaranteed way to pull on my heartstrings, it's a person nearing the end of their life, and a child who just started theirs, taking care of each other. Ah, man, I can't with this, dude. Just get in here, the two of you. Great. So now, I'm taking care of a child who can't do jack shit, and an old man who, while useful in the base, wouldn't be of much use scavenging. This can't go well. And I was correct. It didn't. One of the survivors in the base who I would use to go on scavenging runs was shot dead by a soldier. I was using him to scavenge an abandoned supermarket when I heard a soldier attempting to rape a civilian. I tried to sneak up behind the soldier, but the woman screamed for help once she saw me, alerting the soldier, who shot my survivor dead. His name was Pavle, by the way. So with my main scavenger dead, it didn't take long for food to start running dry. The grandpa and his grandson were starving to death. After Pavle's demise scavenging, I wasn't willing to risk that again. But the only other locations we had access to were swarming with gangs of survivors who hadn't been too kind in the past. Every location, except for one. Quiet House. It's a housing estate that remains almost untouched. It's a calm area of little houses with porches and gardens. Most of those houses are still inhabited. People are trying to lead normal lives there. We've got nothing to look for there, unless we're willing to steal. And yeah, I think I was at the point of stealing. So I take my last semi-healthy survivor, and I head in. I'm not gonna lie, you got this veteran gamer's hands sweating a little. Palve died with the only real weapon we had. All I got on me is a shitty shiv or something. I don't remember what it was exactly. But certainly no match for someone with a home defense shotgun or literally anything else. So I mustered up the courage, knowing very well this can be the end of the whole run, and bust down the door to the residential house. What I find inside is heartbreaking. I have never felt this guilty in a video game. Even Undertale's genocide run didn't really do it for me, But this, God Almighty who art in heaven, forgive me. This War of Mine takes full advantage of its medium. The Last of Us 2 does not. I understand what they were going for. Playing as a character, empathizing with the character. So, if we make you play as the villain, then we'll get you to empathize with the villain. Groundbreaking, revolutionary. Except it's not. Hotline Miami did it already. Twice. And it didn't take 10 to 15 hours to get players to empathize with the antagonist. Hey, but Neo also added a non-linear story structure, eh? Hotline Miami doesn't have that. Oh, shit. Hotline Miami enjoyers stay winning. I'm disappointed these are the games people want to play. I'm sad the current most popular post-apocalyptic game series is modern Fallout. I briefly mentioned this in my first Fallout video. Many Fallout fans are fans of the wrong franchise, but this applies broadly to some fans of other post-apocalyptic games. They want a commodification of the genre. They only want the surface level theming and maybe some of the substance, but not enough to get in the way of what excites them. They want a theme park version of the wasteland, watered down to fit their preferences. Some take their coffee with an egregious amount of milk and sugar. Some want it black because they think it makes them cool. I just want the beans, brother. The best post-apocalyptic games aren't afraid to be dark, but more importantly, they aren't afraid to be honest.